My guest today is Daniel Fincham. He's someone that I have worked with in the past, and he's been on an interesting journey. When I worked with him, he learns that he only had one kidney and he had challenges with alcohol. Since I've worked with him, he has overcome a number of other challenges, and he's now working to help others with their addictions. And that's why I'm interested to understand what it is that he's been through, what that moment of change for him was, uh, and I guess how he has turned his life around. Daniel, thank you for joining me for this session. I've given that quick introduction, but there's a lot more for us to discuss here. 10 years ago, I think it was when we were working together for a company called Zmags, English pronunciation there.
Yeah, well, it depends where you are in the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's it. The alcohol, the drinking, I was aware of some of that. Obviously, the kidney situation as well. But just talk me through that. That the journey that you've been on.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we were working together, I was what you would commonly call like a functioning alcoholic. I would, I was an alcoholic really from my first drink, just because of, I can really remember the way that it would just change the way that I was feeling about myself and the way that it would wrap its arms around me and I could almost learn portray the character and that I wanted to be in life. And I think it helped with situations with women, with work, with meeting new people, and I just relied on it more and more as I grew older. And alcoholism is a really slow progressive disease. It's slowly hijacking and rewiring your brain until you cross a line where you just can't come back. And I became fully dependent on it. And that was the scariest time in my life. And I've lost everything. I've been through a divorce. I've been to prison. But knowing that you are fully dependent on alcohol was just horrific because I knew that I would have to carry it about my person. And at this point, I, I was building this lovely family house. I just had three wonderful children. I had a really good job, and I needed all of those things. So I had this fear of losing these things, and addiction is fundamentally, I think, based in fear. You're fearful of something. Maybe you're trying to forget something, you're trying to escape from something. I think that's where you get this cycle of like Friday night drinking. I want to forget about, my day to day living, and you want to escape and be something different. And I think with the way that I sort of see my alcoholism is I'd always hear people moaning about life, talking about their suffering, talking about somebody else's problems or bickering about somebody else. And in a way, alcohol to me was just a way of, putting my finger up to the world and saying, well, why can't you live like you do on a Friday night every day? Because as a child, as a young adult, I used to love things like festivals and stag do's because people would just let go of everything and just go and enjoy themselves and be, like just go a little bit, but just be a bit different. And I used to revel in that. And I just get the blues, like real hard blues after stag do's and particularly festivals. And alcohol's obviously a depressant, so it doesn't help. But most people could just go back to their day to day so much quicker than I could. So, you know, there's alcohol, and as I've dug a lot deeper into it, like love has been a drug to me. Love has been a significant drug in my life, and alcohol has been a real fuel towards that, as well as status, material things, money. They've all been fuel, but love. I've had three significant relationships in my life. One was this girl at school that I just had to sort of be with, and we stayed together for 7 years, but it became a little bit toxic. Then I went traveling when I was 23, and I met a Danish girl. I fell in love, and I moved to Copenhagen, which is where we met, and which is where I started with Zmags. So I just turned up with my backpack. And of course, when you get to a new country and you've got limited funds and you're trying to make your way, what I would use is alcohol. You know, when I went out to meet new people, and what I liked about going to a new country is you can start redefining the character that you want to be again. So you're putting another mask on, you're playing another role. Um, we were together for about 4 years. That's where I found out that I was born with one kidney. That didn't stop me drinking. And it was really when I split up with my Danish girlfriend after about 4 years. And this is, I found a job that I liked. I bought a flat in Copenhagen. I was happy there, very happy. But instead of telling people that we'd split up, and it was predominantly because we were working different. I was working American time, she was working in the hotel industry, so we weren't seeing each other that much. But when we were, I was a real binge drinker at this time, like blackout drunk, not drinking in the mornings. But instead of telling people, I just started drinking wine, and I'd get home from work, I'd drink a bottle of wine. I started watching the thick of it, and I just repeated that on until time took its toll, and I'd absorbed it, and sort of I just let time sort of heal me. But I was really handing more power over to alcohol to say, right, you fix me, you cure me. And then 6 weeks after we'd split up, I'd just been to Roskilde Festival. I then went straight to Cyprus, where I met my now ex-wife. And that was it then. I was in love again. So she lives in Chester. I live in Copenhagen. And I've just got this fear of like, how do I give her everything that she wants? You know, how do I give her like, we were of a certain age where her friends were married. How do I give her like this stability, this like a dream house, you know, the family that I could sell. She just knew what she wanted in life. She had a steady job, but she'd go to work, she'd come home and she'd forget about work. You know, with Zmags, I was just always thinking about work. How can I progress? How can I do this? So it just became more and more drinking, you know, because I'd be back and forth from Copenhagen to Chester. I then moved back to the London office, met a completely different office, so like testosterone driven sales office that was just out in the week. And I'd noticed I was quite anxious. Like with alcoholism, you have fear, and I had no self-belief, had very little self-worth. In even though people would say I was doing a good job and I would be getting these promoted, I'd be getting recognition, I could never quite believe it myself. So if I was to start presenting to the company and things like that, having a couple of glasses of wine in a boozer, just leaving the office just before I did it, became more of a norm. And what I'd noticed, because if I didn't, I'd be like anxious with the adrenaline, and you could see the physical signs of it, and it was really off-putting, and it would just take it all away. And if you fast forward then 5, 6 years, I'm married. I've got 3 wonderful children. We've just built this dream house, and yet I feel worse than I ever have. I thought these were the things that were going to change me. Like it was like as soon as we got married, we moved in with our parents because we sold both our places. So I was living with our parents. We brought our firstborn back to theirs because we were building a house. My secondborn was then came back to a mobile home as we were building the house. And my daughter, we just finished and we moved in. And none of these things were shifting this big hole in my soul, because it was just more, there was more and more dependency building on alcohol, and I was gambling a lot of money. I was, you know, it cost us a lot of money to build this house. And this fear of getting found out was just eating me up, that I just couldn't think about that. So drinking for me was a way of not thinking so much. And just so when you're in a meeting, if you have a glass of wine, you're not thinking about what other people are thinking of you, because it turns your brain down 20, 30%. And I could still function on 70% of my brain. I knew what I was doing. So you'd never pick it up. But like there were more and more instances of, it was just not good behavior. And I could drink in this mobile home. It was like Trigger's broom on Only Fools and Horses, where he says he's had the same broom, but he'd replaced the handle and the brush 20 times. I remember like Angela, and my wife's called Angela, she got a bottle of vodka from one of her clients over Christmas. And I used to drink that through the day, fill it up with water and replace it. And then I'd be down the shop when the kids and she'd go on to work and just, put the one in the bin and put it back and think, right, I'm not going to drink that today, and then drink it. And she'd come home, and because I wasn't drinking to get absolutely battered, I was drinking to get me through the day. But it just gets worse. It just gets worse. And so at 36, I'm like fully dependent on alcohol. I've reached all these goals, and I think I can't keep going like this. And I'm drinking about 4 or 5 bottles of wine a day now, one in the morning, one I have to go back at lunch to drink, one in the afternoon, and then a couple just to knock me out at night. And, if I was working from home, I'd even have to hide a bottle in the airing cupboard because I'd wake up and be physically shaking. It was that bad. I'd be spewing my stomach lining up in the morning. It was like horrendous. I'd be sweating, shaking. And yet I was still just about like getting through the day until my dad came down to London, and like the flat was just littered with wine bottles. I was having to like leave work early and shit. And he said, "Will you go to a rehab?" And then the next day he was taking me down to Wales, and I was in a rehab. And everybody thought, right, this is the magic wand that you need. I didn't tell work because I got signed off with depression and anxiety. And they said, look, you've been doing a lot. Take the time. And I came out. It was a CBT based rehab. So they don't really say you've got alcoholism. They're like, you use alcohol as a crutch. Very soft, which I liked at the time. So I just thought I could go back doing what I was doing. But I was being treated like an alcoholic then. And all this independence, all this autonomy, me traveling down to London, traveling to the States, traveling to Copenhagen, all went. I was in this goldfish bowl, and I started behaving like an alcoholic. And I had to, within 5 months, this was September 2019, I had to leave my job. The family left, got kicked out of home. I was in prison for 30 days. I came out. I got divorce papers, which gave me license to drink more. I ended up back in prison. So this is the May of 2020. And in that cell, I just accepted everything. I accepted who I was, what I'd done, and all that fear went, because I had nothing left to lose. I had nothing left to fear. I was just as raw and broken as you could be. And I tried to take my own life a couple of times. And that's why I'd ended up in prison, ironically. But when I came out of prison, this pecking, because addiction is in your head, and it's just in your head, peck, peck, peck. And you're driven by this pounding of thoughts to drink, to take the edge off, to do this, to do that, to make you feel better. And it's just to alleviate the noise and the stress in your mind. But I didn't have that. And I could almost see my thoughts. And that's what gave me a chance. And so 6 weeks into my own recovery, and I was being told I was in recovery, but I didn't really know what it was. And I started Googling nutrition, exercise, yoga, meditation, started reading around Buddhism, quantum physics. I picked up my guitar, I started running, I started talking to people, started reading. And then but I could never find a constant to go back to. And I met all the people in the recovery community who were cobbling together meetings and chats and all this with different technologies and with all these wellness apps. 6 weeks in, I started Recoverlution to give recovery a home and have a content library, have a communication and networking platform, and have a wellness hub dedicated to addiction. And that is really where this psychic change happened, because Recoverlution is all about getting people into recovery sooner, making sure people don't have to go through what I have to go through. Because actually, recovery is a place of peace and contentment. And there's so many people in recovery that we support each other, that this need to change the way that I think or be somebody else removed the need for me to drink. And I have had a chance. I'll always be an alcoholic. And I've had a couple of relapses, but I've been able to dust myself off. You know, sometimes you have to test if the fire's still hot. It still burns you, because even though you can rewire your brain, the neuron stems, they don't reduce like other neurons in your brain. So as soon as that alcohol hits, it's like, bing, 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 I'm back. And the voices are back, and it's insane. And so I guess, I know I've talked for a bit here, but I guess the message to anybody, because 70% of people who are struggling with addiction are working. And you don't have, the message I guess I've got is that you don't have to struggle, because recovery is literally possible for anyone. And it's transformative.
Yeah, amazing to hear that. Sorry, I didn't know a lot of that. A couple of things I heard you say there, I'd just like to pick up on and drill into in a bit more detail. So you mentioned fear of loss, I guess,
Yeah.
in the case of the story and the journey that you've been on. Fear is one of the chains that I talk about that hold us back. The fear of
Yeah.
loss being one, or the mental images that we create of a worst case scenario,
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
is the way that I position it. But it's something that we've created of such a minute possibility, but we let it drive us. We give into it, and then we try
Yeah.
and find something that takes that fear away, or manages it for us for a period of time. So for you, I guess it was the alcohol. Different people handle that in different ways. And it sounds like the journey that you've been through, and obviously the stint in prison as well. You mentioned effectively hitting rock bottom.
Mm.
I guess it's that almost slap in the face to say, paraphrasing well, you've got nothing to fear. You've got nothing left. And I guess, okay, so that's a challenge for some of reaching that point. But for anybody else who isn't yet at rock bottom, it's how can they appreciate where they are, that the situation isn't as bad as they think it is, to be able to pick themselves up and say, you know what, I'm actually making this worse for myself because of the images that I'm creating, the fear that I have of something happening that is probably unlikely, but I'm letting it drive me. I'm just interested to get your thoughts now. Obviously, if we were to do a ladder, you unfortunately got a couple of steps towards the bottom of the
Yeah.
ladder in
Yeah.
terms of what you went through, but just helping people understand that, and some of the thought processes that you went through.
Yeah. So there's like, you learn a lot about where cliches come from in recovery. So there's nothing left to fear but fear itself. And that was so true to me. And somebody once said, like, where I was is, we call, like, when we're going up the ladder in our career, like glass ceilings. If you're in a downward spiral, you can look at them as glass bottoms, and you can see through the next glass bottom, but you can break through them. But eventually you'll hit a glass bottom that it's just impossible to break through. But you don't have to get to that glass bottom. And then I think, if your mind is programmed like me, you can't stand still. You're either regressing or you're progressing. And I think what the one thing to do for anybody is to talk to somebody. If you've got a fear, if you've got a problem, if you've got a challenge, talk to somebody that you trust, and they will challenge that thought. They will challenge that fear, because they'll see it from a different perspective. And they may be able to shine a light that actually that fear is not as big or as great or even as real as you think. And that's what really helps. because if you're talking to someone else and talk to someone else about their problems, because it takes you out of yourself and you're helping somebody else through their problems, and it takes your mind away from what you're thinking. But addiction is like so many things. Addiction is an illness in the brain. And we all, you could see somebody smiling down the street. You don't know what they're telling themselves in their head. That's why you should just always be kind to anybody, because I do see a therapist and she says, you've just got so many, she calls them paradoxes, where something good will happen. And I still do this today, but I'll talk to myself like a piece of shit, or I won't think I'm worth it. So I'll do something to negate it. And she's like, why are you doing these things? You have to reframe the way that you think. You deserve what you get, sort of thing. So trying to give yourself the self-compassion and the love and maybe the forgiveness that you would give to someone else, give it to yourself. There's loads of ways that you can do it, and I think it's trying to recognize that you are manifesting how you perceive the world. You are, like, the possibilities are endless, and I think the more we learn about quantum mechanics and physics, and like people like Joe Dispenza and all these people, like it's like the universe is crazy, and the only thing I really know is that I am. Everything else is experience and perception. So you can use meditation, you can use walking, you can use exercise. There's loads and loads of things that you can do, but to get control of your mind, or to, I think if you look at Buddhism, we create our own suffering, and Buddhism is in the search of removing your own suffering. We can feel people's pain, we can empathize with it, but we don't have to let it cause suffering for us. We're not, it's accepting the things that we can't control, and having the wisdom to change the things that we can, and really just accepting our that anything is possible, quite literally. But to try and get yourself in that positive mindset, because you get yourself on this different vibration, you'll attract different types of people. Find your tribe. Don't try and fit into groups of people or workplaces or environments that you're not comfortable with just because you think that you should or that you have to. There's a lot of power in saying no to people and knowing your boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. The journey that I've been on, and the people that I've spoken to, it is about that. We have the power to control certain things. Some of the things we will never be able to control, like, the changing of the lights as we're driving. It's just something that's going to happen. There's no point getting worked up about it because we can't control it. The more we let those things control us or influence us, the more of a crappy day we're going to have. So,
Yeah.
I think it is about that recognition and acceptance that, there'll be some things that we can't do anything about. The tax
Yeah.
rates, are we the politicians making the decisions? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we just have to accept them. It's a silly example, but it's I guess understanding the world around us to say, what are the things that I can categorically control? My actions, how I respond to situations, my
Exactly.
emotions, the
Yeah.
thoughts that I have. Okay, right, maybe I need to rebuild those, reframe them, think about things in a slightly different way. And you mentioned their perspectives as well. Absolutely. I've had that
Yeah.
situation. I've been like, beating myself up, and somebody's gone, oh, but have you tried doing it this way? And I'm like, of course, it's so simple. You've just given
Yeah.
me the solution, and I've been, stood there for 4 hours
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
work this out. And you're like, sometimes that's all it takes. And
Yeah.
we beat ourselves up unnecessarily about all sorts of different situations. So great to hear you say that. Now, Recoverlution, talk to me about that. So tech startup, mobile app, supporting the community. How's that evolved over the past, what is it, sort of 6 to 8 months or so?
No, we've been going since 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So 6 weeks in, I started. I bought the domain name. I put what is essentially like a blog on Wix, where I was just blogging about all these things that I was doing, and I thought, hang on, we need this. This could be a lot bigger. So I went out and got some funding, got a little dev team. And do you remember Raj, who worked for us,
Yeah.
Salesforce guy? He went and got some developers for me. He's now invested in the company. Obviously, I've worked with him, which so the way that we looked after Raj, so it comes back because he believed in what I was doing, and an investor that I'd worked with when I finished university, they backed it and still are. So I got a dev team, and we got some content writers. So we basically everything that I wrote has been scrapped over time, and it's really a technology. So what most people have done in the addiction space is they built a solution. It might be a drink counter. It might be a sober app, or there's lots of different not great solutions out there, like a data, you can put the data in it, like a CBT app. It would put the data in and spit out what you need to do. So what I wanted to be is the home of recovery. There's no brand in recovery. Recovery is quite unknown. You think of words like recovery and AA, most people think their car's going to be picked up. So I really, as a brand, we wanted to shine a light on the power of recovery, because so many people in the public eye are in recovery. Film stars, rock stars, authors, and I've seen, and just in the communities, just people go on and do amazing things because they apply the principles of recovery to their lives, which are essentially just spiritual principles. Like even the 12 steps of AA, you could tie that quite closely to Buddhist practices. So we built loads of content, and then the real technology is in this, the infrastructure behind, like having a news feed, being able to connect with people in recovery anonymously, being able to run online meetings. So if you think of Google Drive, WhatsApp, PayPal, Facebook, Zoom, and all these other little technologies that people are using, we basically put them into one platform, in a best of class sort of way. And then with the Wellness Hub, we work with some amazing people to build programs. So whether it was meditation, exercise, nutrition, yoga, breath work, but instead of telling you what to do, we write about why we think they're important, why we design them. So that was like really going to market, and that took some time because there is no platform like us. So it was all about brand awareness, creating the space, PR, news. So we had Paul Merson as our ambassador for a bit, but actually it's been way slower. That's why it's taken this long, because we're really, and like the recovery is like in the stone age when it comes to digital. So the way that we've really addressed that is actually it's the people who support people in recovery that we want on the platform, because they'll bring most of the communities. So we've launched in Recoverlution spaces, and you can think of that as like a LinkedIn business type page where any organization, charity, rehab can represent themselves on the platform, tell people about the services that they've got, create their own groups, their own meetings, their own events. And then in the back of that, you've got like a user management, like lifelong communication is huge, because how do you know if you've gone to a rehab, if that's good, if what they're doing in 3 years' time? And then some insights. We got all the stats in the world about addiction. The journey of people in recovery is really unknown. So we'll start to sort of really understand that journey. And so now we're starting to really work with some of the big service providers in the UK to get them onboarded onto the platform, and support groups like Smart Recovery and AA, and that slowly, but surely coming onto the platform, because the goal is just to be the glue in the ecosystem, because it's all about the member. I only knew 1% of what was available to me. I thought I could go to my GP. I'll tell you what my GP told me when I said I was having trouble with alcohol. He said, just push the pint further away from you so it takes longer to drink. Right? It's insane. Or I thought I could go to a rehab, which scared the shit out of me, because I'd have had to tell my employer, there's a cost. So but actually there are untold ways to recover, and people recover in so many different ways. If you can get everybody onto the platform and just show what people are doing and get people connected, because it's people who get people recovered. There's no magic wand, there's no magic pill. You know, you do half the work, or you do a lot of the work. You might need medication. I've used medication, and you know, you might need a detox, you might need a service just to. That's almost like the ambulance to get you to what where you need to be. So they're your safe hands, and once you're safe enough, everything's there for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you taking that a community approach and getting some of the other people involved because there's that support mechanism there. I think the other
That's
thing that's interesting to hear you say it is you wanting to demonstrate the journey that other people have been on and how they
yeah,
are going through recovery, what they've tried and what's worked for them and things like that. Because a lot of the time, you know, whether it's addiction or whether it's trying to build a business, there's a sense of isolation. We feel like we're
yeah,
doing it on our own. And in reality, that's not true most of the time. And if we can see in front of us what's possible, other people have done it. So, you know, the great example that a lot of, you know, people in the business space use is that sort of was it the 4 minute mile? And, you know,
yeah,
making that nobody had done it for ages. Then Roger Bannister did it. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, ah, okay, it is possible. And then like 11 people in a couple of months have done exactly the same thing. It's like
yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
we have to see and experience what other people are doing to be able to say, ah, okay, right, now I can see what's possible. I can see how people have done it. Maybe that's something that can work for me. And so building that community aspect into the Recoverlution platform, it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. I think it's going to be. I think it's a way that social networks are going to. I think the old. I think so, the old traditional social networks are just marketing platforms, and I think real social platforms. There's a good example is an app called Peanut, and it's a safe space for women, and it was really designed by a woman who I think she was either pregnant or she'd just given birth, and she wanted to talk to mums who were in the same place as her. She didn't want to go and talk to a doctor. She just wanted to, and she wanted to find people in her area that she could meet with a baby. And it's been tight. I think there's menopausal women as well, because people want to find people just to ask them a question, get some support, be vulnerable. And you just can't be vulnerable on a social platform because it's like you've got to be your best self. It's horrible. It's very toxic. So, you know, the Brené Brown speaks a lot about sort of vulnerability and being vulnerable, even as a leader. And I'm pretty sure she's in recovery, and that didn't surprise me because you know she's applying some of that, you know, those recovery traits that got her well into a different realm because it worked because it's you know being you know applying your moral compass to everything that you do will drive you forward, um, and being vulnerable and being honest are integral parts of that. And recovery, no one gets into recovery without having regrets, without having amends to do. But you can clear them out. You can go back and you can apologize. You can put things right. You can rebuild relationships. You can rebuild your finances. You can do all of those things. With the idea being that you don't carry that baggage. You don't carry any more baggage with you. From that point, you're just open, honest. You talk, and you build the habits that are going to keep you well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess building from the platform, you've got a book as well in the works.
I've basically given you a synopsis on this podcast. So yeah, it starts with me in prison the first time, and like I learned a lot from being in prison. And the two times I was in for 30 days. You know, don't worry, I didn't kill anybody or anything. I didn't do anything. And but I saw so much. I saw I saw a side of society that nobody knows. Prison is not full of murderers and paedophiles. You know, it was full of. There's a really good book by Angela Cohen called Criminal, which she's close to me in Manchester, so I've spoken to her a bit about it. But it's from people that are from care homes, you know, have got learning difficulties, that have got addictions. That's like 78% of the prisons, and they're just put in a box and they just go around, they get released, and they're just petty offenders. But I was in a holding cell with a homeless guy who was addicted to opioids, and he was in prison because he stole some food to feed himself. And it was just like, that's not a crime. You know, it is, but the guy's homeless. He's starving. Like shame on us as a society is what I was sort of saying. And people aren't out to get you in prison. Again, as long as you don't rob from somebody, you're being. And so people took me under their wing because they knew I was vulnerable. They knew there was no value in beating me up or being a bully towards me, because what does that say to other people? So it was a real eye opener. And so it starts there, and obviously it's the worst place to be when you're detoxing, like you're withdrawing horrendously. And then it sort of goes back to the childhood, to sort of take you through the progression of what an addict thinks throughout that time until I go back, and then it goes through the reasons why I went to prison, and then it goes on to Recoverlution. So it's really there to. I mean, there's some really funny stuff in there, and there's some real tragic stuff in there, because, you know, like a lot of the time that we had at Zmags as an example, and like my college years, my university years, even my married life, you know, it's not all doom and gloom, but you can see the deterioration of a human being, how progressive it is. And if you're on that spiral, unless you make changes now, it will get worse. If you're suffering with alcoholism or an addiction, it wants you, and you're digging your own grave. It wants you dead, and unfortunately, it's just so progressive. So it's to try and encourage people to see the signs and make the changes that I made, arguably, you know, a lot later than I needed to.
Yeah. So that should be coming out a couple of months.
No, we're going to get it out. I think probably like September time now, because we really want to try and build way more of a following on Recover. You know, like the audience really is like, we want to try and get like Recoverlution exponentially sort of growing as best we can. And when I say exponentially, because it's going to grow inside out. We don't do any paid ads. We don't, because the cost of acquisition for any platform is high. So we want people like inviting people, referring people in, you know, coming in and getting that like sort of trust within the platform, which it's so chicken and egg, because you need user activity, user generated content to get people into the platform. But how do you get people into the platform without the user? You know, so it's just really trying to get it to where it needs to be, before we, and maybe look to take it into the US as soon as we sort of feel like we've cracked it.
Nice.
But if anybody's on this podcast and wants to read it, you know, I'd happily sort of send it to anybody if they thought it would help.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So closing thoughts then. You have been on that journey, addiction to now being an entrepreneur and author. If there were 3 lessons or 3 comments that you would make to listeners, you know, if they're struggling, not necessarily addiction, but just struggling with life in general, you know, feeling stuck and frustrated, or, you know, they can't see a way out of their current situation, what would you say to them?
I'd say that anybody is worthy of love, is worth, has a purpose, has a meaning. That, to be authentic and, you know that everybody has trouble, and the strongest thing to do is to talk about that, and that anything is possible, and to believe that you might not, nothing happens overnight, but nothing changes unless you change. So you just have to believe, believe that anything is possible, and things will start to happen, because you'll find your people, you'll find your path, you'll find your calling, whatever you call it. So those would be, yeah. So believe in yourself, be yourself, and see your future self.